A lone gunslinger faces a ruthless tyrant to save an innocent town. The town of Emberfall lay at the edge of human space, a forgotten place where the stars seemed dimmer, and the wind carried dust like memories of battles long past. The buildings were simple, made of metal sheets and salvaged wood, and the streets were quiet except for the occasional clatter of boots or a wagon wheel. Life here was hard, slow, and fragile. Yet the people endured, because enduring was all they knew. But there was fear in Emberfall. Fear that had a name, Zarok the Tyrant. He was an alien warlord who ruled the sector with iron claws. His enforcers patrolled the nearby systems, demanding tribute and obedience. He had no mercy for towns that resisted, and his punishments were legendary. Ships sent distress signals often disappeared, never to return. People here whispered his name with trembling lips. They had learned long ago that no one would save them, except themselves. It was under this weight of fear that a stranger arrived. The gunslinger walked into Emberfall on a late afternoon when the sun hung low, casting long red shadows over the streets. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and wore a coat that had seen better days. Dust clung to his boots and sleeves, and a wide-brimmed hat shadowed his face. He carried nothing but two blasters strapped to his hips, their polished metal glinting faintly. The townsfolk paused to watch him. Children clutched their mothers' skirts. Farmers leaned on their plows, squinting. Merchants stepped out of their shops, hands hovering near the knives hidden under counters. Everyone felt it. The stranger was not ordinary. Something about him radiated quiet strength, a calm that came from surviving more than most could imagine. The gunslinger walked down the main street slowly. He didn't look around, didn't ask questions. He simply moved, like a shadow flowing through the dusty sun. His eyes, sharp and clear beneath the brim of his hat, scanned everything: the broken windows, the faded signs, the children peeking around the corners. He noticed the fear in the people, the tension in their movements, and he understood it immediately. Emberfall was a town that had given up hope. The first person to speak to him was the sheriff, a wiry man named Harlan. His face was weathered, his eyes tired from years of keeping a town safe with too little and too few. "You're far from home," Harlan said, his voice cautious. "What brings you here?" The gunslinger tipped his hat just slightly. "Looking for work," he said. His voice was low, steady, carrying the weight of experience. "And I heard this town might need help." Harlan's lips tightened. "You heard right. But help here comes with a price. The price is your life if you face Zarok." The gunslinger paused, then nodded once. "I know." That simple acknowledgement sent a ripple through the small crowd that had gathered. No one had said those words aloud in Emberfall before. The people did not expect courage here. They expected caution. And yet, here was a man who had accepted the danger without flinching. The gunslinger walked to the center of town and dismounted from his horse. He tied the reins loosely to a post, then turned to look at the buildings surrounding the square. There was a general store, a tavern with a swinging sign, a small schoolhouse, and a few homes. Most were silent. Most were empty. Some windows were boarded up. He could feel the tension pressing down on him, a heavy weight, almost like a physical thing. A young boy, no older than 10, stepped forward from the shadow of the tavern. "Mister?" he asked, voice trembling. "Are you Doto? Are you going to fight him?" The gunslinger looked down at the boy. His eyes softened for a fraction of a second. "I don't fight because I want to," he said. "I fight because it has to be done. Do you understand?" The boy nodded quickly, then ran back to his mother. The gunslinger didn't smile. He never did. That night, Emberfall was quiet. The people went about their lives as if nothing had changed, but their eyes kept flicking to the stranger. He sat outside the tavern, sharpening his weapons, checking the blasters carefully. There was precision in his movements, a ritual that spoke of discipline and countless battles fought. Harlan watched from a distance, unsure whether to trust him, unsure whether to fear him. Suddenly, a distant rumble shook the ground. The townsfolk froze. Horses whinnied, dogs barked. The gunslinger's head lifted slowly, ears and eyes catching what others could barely perceive. Dust clouds appeared on the horizon. Scouts. Zarak scouts. The gunslinger rose, moving with silent urgency. He went to the edge of town, standing tall, arms relaxed but ready. The scouts, hovering in their small skiffs with energy blasters glinting in the fading sun, slowed as they saw him. One of them laughed, alien voices screeching over the comm. A lone human? You think you can stop us? The gunslinger didn't answer. He didn't move a step forward. He simply waited. When the first scout fired, he was already moving. Faster than the eye could track, he dodged, rolled, and returned fire with deadly accuracy. Each shot was precise, controlled, hitting exactly where it needed to. The scouts hadn't expected skill like this. They panicked, hurling commands at each other, trying to retreat, trying to regroup. By the time the dust settled, 2 skiffs lay wrecked outside town, smoking and sparking. The rest of the scouts fled, calling for reinforcements. Emberfall's people stood in stunned silence. No one had fired a weapon, not even the sheriff, yet the gunslinger had defended them without hesitation. Harlan approached him slowly, hand on the hilt of his old revolver. What are you?" he asked. The gunslinger looked at him, still calm, still measured. "Just a human," he said. "One who won't let this town die if I can help it." The words were simple. The weight behind them was enormous. The townsfolk felt it. For the first time in years, they saw hope, faint but real. They had been waiting for someone to defy Zarak, and now they understood that defiance could come in the form of one human willing to risk everything. That night, the gunslinger walked through the town quietly, observing. He saw broken fences, scared children, and men who had long forgotten courage. He saw the fear in the tavern, the uncertainty in the general store, and the quiet determination hidden in the schoolhouse. He made a plan, though he did not share it. Zarak would come. He always came, and when he did, the gunslinger would be ready. The next morning, Emberfall was different. The sun rose, bright and burning, and the townspeople went about their chores with eyes sharper than before. Rumors of the gunslinger's deeds spread faster than the wind. Mothers whispered to their children, shopkeepers spoke in hushed tones, and Harlan finally allowed himself to hope. In the far distance, Zarak watched the aftermath of his scout's defeat through a hollow screen in his flagship. His claws clenched. "A human?" he hissed. "A single human is making a mockery of my rule? Send more men. Destroy that town. Leave nothing." The gunslinger, meanwhile, was already preparing. He walked to the edge of town, inspecting the terrain, noting choke points, and marking where traps could be set. He trained silently with his blasters, each movement precise, controlled, perfect. He was not reckless. He was deliberate. Every action was designed to save lives, not to seek glory. By evening, he sat outside the tavern once more, cleaning weapons, watching the stars. Emberfall was quiet again, but there was a new energy in the air. People peeked from windows, children tiptoed outside, and even Harlan lingered, trying to understand the strange man who had walked out of the dust and refused to leave. "Why do you stay?" Harlan finally asked. The gunslinger looked up at the stars, silent for a long moment. "Because someone has to," he said simply. "Because if humans don't fight, no one else will." And with that, the first part of Emberfall's new story ended. A story that would grow into legend, a story that would challenge a tyrant, and a story that would teach the galaxy a dangerous truth. Never underestimate a human, even when they stand alone. The morning after the gunslinger's first defense, Emberfall woke to a fragile sense of hope. Children peered out from their homes, whispering excitedly to one another. Farmers went to their fields with eyes sharper, noticing every sound in the distance. Even the adults, usually bowed by fear, held themselves a little straighter. For the first time, the town felt alive. But beyond the horizon, in a massive warship that dwarfed Emberfall like a moon against a pebble, Zarak the Tyrant was furious. His claws tapped on the hollow console as he watched the reports of his defeated scouts. "A single human has destroyed my men," he hissed, his reptilian face twisting with rage. His eyes, red like molten metal, scanned the sector map. "Send more troops. Burn that town. Let nothing remain." His advisors and generals, creatures of different shapes and sizes, none of them had ever seen Zarak this furious.
"My lord,"
one whispered, "this human is unusual. He moves with precision, cunning, unlike any human we have faced." Zarak slammed his claw down. "Unusual or not, he will die. I will make an example of Emberfall. He cannot stop me." Meanwhile, back in Emberfall, the gunslinger moved quietly through the town. He did not sleep long. He never did. He walked past the broken fences, past the terrified children, past the empty windows, and surveyed the land beyond the town. He measured distances, studied hills, and marked natural barriers where an ambush could be set. Every rock, every ditch, every piece of cover mattered. He had learned long ago that the best weapon in a fight was knowledge. Harlan watched him from a distance, still skeptical but curious. "You plan to fight Zarak?" he asked cautiously. The gunslinger looked up, eyes calm and hard. "I plan to survive, and I plan to make sure he cannot destroy this town." Fighting him directly is foolish. Trickery, traps, timing. These are my weapons. The rest is patience. Harlan nodded slowly. "I've never seen a human so steady. Even when the scouts attacked yesterday, you didn't panic." The gunslinger shrugged. "I've learned humans can survive more than anyone expects. Fear is a choice." That afternoon, Emberfall began to feel the first true stirrings of resistance. The gunslinger instructed the townsfolk carefully. He did not turn them into soldiers. They were not ready, but he showed them how to hide, how to move quickly, and how to protect themselves. Farmers learned to use tools as weapons. Children learned to signal danger silently, and the tavern became a lookout post. Every action, small as it seemed, built confidence. The people were no longer just waiting to be destroyed. They were preparing to survive. From his flagship, Zarak began to observe. He sent spies, skiffs, drones, alien mercenaries, but each one returned damaged or destroyed. Each failure fueled his growing frustration. "These humans," he hissed, "they are cunning. They adapt too quickly. Crush them!" Zarak had ruled for decades, and nothing had challenged him like this. On every world he had conquered, he had relied on fear and overwhelming power, but this human was different. He did not fight like a soldier. He fought like a storm, unpredictable, relentless, and deadly. The gunslinger had noticed the change as well. He studied the approaching patrols carefully, noting patterns in timing and behavior. He learned which paths were safe, which hills provided cover, and which enemy strategies repeated. He set small traps, a snare here, a hidden explosive there. Every move was designed to waste the tyrant's resources and teach the enemy caution. One evening, a small patrol of Zarak's enforcers crept toward Emberfall. They thought they were stealthy, confident that one human could not defend the town. But the gunslinger anticipated them. A rope snapped, a pit fell, a blaster fired from the shadows. The patrol panicked. Screeching in alien tongues, they fled, leaving behind weapons and reports of human precision. The townsfolk cheered quietly, careful not to draw attention. Children whispered excitedly, "The gunslinger did it again!" Even Harlan allowed himself a smile. He was starting to understand the simple truth. One human, if clever and brave, could challenge an empire. That night, the gunslinger walked along the outskirts of the town, inspecting the traps and the terrain again. The stars were bright, scattered across the black sky like shards of hope. He thought about Zarak, about his power, and about the humans who had survived far worse than this tyrant. Survival was not just about strength, it was about mind, will, and courage. The next day, Zarak's reinforcements arrived. Larger ships, armed with energy weapons, hovered over Emberfall. Alien soldiers marched in formation across the hills. The townsfolk watched from their hiding places, fear gripping them again. The gunslinger, however, stood in the open. He didn't flinch, didn't run, didn't panic. The aliens laughed at him. "Do you really think one human can stop us?" their leader sneered. The gunslinger didn't answer. He fired. He dashed off and disappeared. The shots were precise, hitting weak points in their armor. Several soldiers fell, their weapons sparking and useless. Panic spread through the ranks. The human was faster, smarter, and unrelenting. Zarak's ships hovered, scanning, analyzing. The tyrant's face twisted with anger. "Increase the firepower!" he roared. "Destroy that town and kill the human first!" The gunslinger ducked behind a boulder, rolling as plasma bolts streaked past him. Every move was deliberate. Every shot was calculated. He didn't aim to kill them all, only to slow them, to teach them caution. As the day wore on, the gunslinger's tactics became clearer to the townsfolk. They saw the enemy hesitate, saw soldiers retreat, saw their invaders forced to adapt. The fear that had gripped Emberfall for years began to break. They started helping quietly, hiding supplies, signaling danger, moving children to safe places. They were not fighting yet, but they were no longer just victims. Even Zarak began to notice the pattern. His troops were failing not because of numbers or firepower, but because this human anticipated them. Every trap, every strike, every defensive position was evidence of careful study and planning. The tyrant's pride could not tolerate it. He had never been outsmarted before. That night, Emberfall celebrated quietly. The gunslinger sat alone by a fire, cleaning his weapons and sharpening his senses. Harlan joined him, leaning on a wooden post. "You've done more in a week than anyone here could dream," he said softly. The gunslinger did not look up. "The war hasn't started yet," he said. "This is only the beginning. Zarak will come, stronger, with more men. He will test me, test the town. If I fail, Emberfall dies. I have to be ready."
Harlan nodded slowly. "And if you succeed?"
The gunslinger finally glanced at him. eyes hard but calm. Then they will learn something important. Humans survive when others expect them to fail. We fight when everyone else would run. And we do not give up, no matter the cost. In the shadows beyond Emberfall, Zarak fumed. His advisors watched nervously as the tyrant plotted his next move. He would not be humiliated by a single human. Not again. But the gunslinger had already forced him to adapt, to question his own power, to feel doubt for the first time in decades. The humans of Emberfall slept uneasy, but proud. They were still afraid, but their fear had a new companion: hope. A human had stood against the tyrant and survived. And now they began to understand that one person, one determined human, could change everything. The night was long and filled with tension. The gunslinger patrolled silently, checking each trap, each barricade, each hiding place. He listened to the sounds of the town, the whispers of children, the creaking of doors, and the rustle of wind over the desert hills. Every detail mattered. He prepared not for glory, but for survival. And for the first time, Emberfall had a chance. By the next dawn, Emberfall was ready. Not fully armed, not fully trained, but ready. The humans were awake in a way they hadn't been for years, and the gunslinger stood in the center of the town, calm, precise, unyielding. Because in Emberfall, one human had become more than a defender. He had become a symbol that even the mightiest tyrant could face resistance. A symbol that courage, skill, and determination could turn fear into hope. And a symbol that humans, when pushed to the edge, could do the impossible. The sun rose over Emberfall with a pale, cold light. Smoke still curled from the destroyed scouts of the previous day, and the townspeople moved cautiously through the streets. For the first time, they were not hiding entirely. They moved with purpose. Mothers carried children carefully. Men and women checked barricades, and even teenagers took turns watching from the rooftops. They were beginning to understand what the gunslinger had shown them. Survival was a choice, and hope could exist even under the shadow of a tyrant. But the shadow came faster than anyone expected. From beyond the distant hills, the ground shook with the heavy tread of Zarak's forces. This time he had come himself. A fleet of skiffs and walkers moved toward the town, their weapons charged, their alien soldiers chanting in harsh tones. Emberfall's people froze. Some whispered prayers. Some gripped whatever they could as a weapon. The fear they had carried for years returned, heavier than ever. The gunslinger stood at the edge of town, watching them approach. He did not flinch. He did not panic. His eyes moved quickly, noting hills, ditches, and positions where the enemy would be vulnerable. He did not have the numbers. He did not have reinforcements. But he had what mattered most: skill, patience, and the will to survive. Harlan appeared beside him, revolver in hand. "They've brought everything," he said. "There's no way one man—" "Then we make them hesitate," the gunslinger interrupted. "We make them doubt." The aliens advanced, confident and cruel. Zarak rowed a massive skiff in the center, flanked by elite warriors. His presence alone sent shivers through the townsfolk. They had heard the stories. Entire villages burned, populations enslaved, any resistance crushed. And yet, here was the gunslinger, standing in the open, waiting. The first shots rang out. The media was commonplace. Energy bolts streaked through the air, but the gunslinger moved like lightning. He rolled, dodged, and fired back, hitting exactly where it hurt the enemy most: the joints of the walkers, the weak armor plating of the skiffs. Each shot caused a pause, a hesitation. He was not trying to kill everyone. He was trying to show them that humans were dangerous, that they could not take Emberfall lightly. The townsfolk watched in awe. They had never seen anyone move like this. The gunslinger was faster than the eye could follow, his mind calculating every trajectory, every angle, every moment. The alien soldiers were disciplined, but discipline could not match instinct, speed, and human cunning. Zarak roared from his skiff. "Destroy him! Burn the town! Kill every human!" The gunslinger did not respond. He fired another precise shot, and a skiff's engine exploded, throwing the alien inside across the dust. The other soldiers faltered. Confusion spread. Zarak's confidence wavered for the first time in decades. From their hiding places, the townsfolk began to take action. They did not fight like soldiers. They did not charge blindly. They carried water, rolled barrels into pathways, and guided the wounded to safety. They used small, simple tricks the gunslinger had shown them, dropping sand in engines, tripping wires, blocking doors. Every small act added to the chaos in the enemy ranks. The gunslinger moved through the middle of the town like a shadow. He fired, rolled, and vanished behind cover. He shouted instructions quietly to Harlan and a few brave men. "Move here! Cover that street! Watch the rooftops!" Every order was precise. Every movement saved lives. Zarak's elite warriors finally reached the town square, thinking they had trapped the gunslinger. But the human had planned for this. He fired from above, hidden on a rooftop, then dropped behind the alley, striking again from an unexpected direction. His movements were unpredictable, almost impossible to follow. Alien soldiers fell, and those who remained hesitated. The townsfolk realized something astonishing. They were not just watching a human fight. They were witnessing defiance itself. The gunslinger was not fighting for glory, not fighting for revenge, not even fighting for himself. He was fighting for them. Every shot, every dodge, every plan showed a human mind that refused to accept fear as the final word. Children peeked from windows, eyes wide, whispering to each other. Farmers clutched their tools, inspired. Even the elders, who had long given up hope, nodded quietly to themselves. Emberfall was alive again, not because of magic or luck, but because one human had dared to stand. Hours passed. The aliens struggled to advance, slowed by traps, confusion, and the gunslinger's precision. Zarak's anger grew.
"You are nothing," he bellowed. "A single human cannot defeat me." The gunslinger didn't answer.
He didn't need to. His actions spoke louder than words. He struck when necessary, retreated when wise, and used every advantage the town offered. Slowly, deliberately, he turned the tyrant's power into hesitation. Zarak's soldiers began to doubt themselves. They looked at Emberfall not as a conquered town, but as a battlefield where humans refused to die quietly. Then the impossible happened. One of the skiffs toppled near the center of town. Alien soldiers scrambled to rescue it, exposing themselves to the gunslinger's fire. He moved like a ghost, striking precisely. Zarak's confidence broke further. Every attempt to intimidate the human failed. Every attack only proved the gunslinger's point. Humans did not surrender, and humans did not yield. Harlan watched, revolver shaking in his hand. "I can't believe what I'm seeing," he whispered. The gunslinger glanced at him briefly. "Believe it. Humans are dangerous when cornered, dangerous when protecting others, and most of all, dangerous when they refuse to give up." By the evening, the dust settled, but the battle was far from over. Emberfall streets were scarred, debris scattered everywhere. smoke rising from several damaged skiffs. The townsfolk emerged from hiding cautiously. No one celebrated yet. They knew Zarak would return, but for the first time they walked with heads held high. The gunslinger walked through the town slowly, checking on everyone. He helped the wounded, reassured the frightened, and gave instructions for repairs. His calm presence, even after a brutal day, strengthened the town's resolve. Children ran up to him, eyes wide. "Will he come back?" one asked. The gunslinger knelt, eyes level with the boy. "Yes," he said simply, "but we are ready. Emberfall will not fall easily, not while we are willing to fight." Even as he spoke, beyond the hills, Zarak's warship hovered silently. The tyrant's face twisted in fury. "A human alone has made my soldiers hesitate. This is unacceptable. I will crush them tomorrow. I will show them the power of the Empire." But for Emberfall, the change had already begun. Fear no longer ruled the people. Hope had returned. Courage, small and fragile, bloomed like the first wildflowers after a long winter. And the gunslinger, alone, silent, unstoppable, was the reason. As night fell, the gunslinger sat outside the tavern once more, cleaning his weapons under the pale moonlight. Harlan joined him, this time quieter, reflective. "You've turned fear into something useful," he said. The gunslinger nodded slowly. "Humans survive by turning fear into focus, by turning desperation into strength. The moment you accept fear as the only answer, you lose. But if you accept it as a tool, it can make you stronger than anything else in the galaxy." Harlan shivered, both from the cold and from the truth of those words. Emberfall had not been saved by luck or chance. It had been saved by one human's skill, patience, and courage. And now its people were beginning to understand that courage could be theirs too. Beyond the town, Zarak's shadow loomed. The tyrant was not defeated, but he had been forced to adapt. He had been forced to recognize humans as more than fragile, simple creatures. They were clever, they were persistent, they were dangerous, and one human had already changed everything. By the time the stars fully filled the sky, Emberfall slept under a fragile sense of security. They had survived a direct attack from the tyrant himself. They had seen courage, skill, and defiance in action. And though the fight was far from over, the people were no longer just victims. The gunslinger walked quietly along the streets, observing the repairs, checking the traps, and listening to the whispers of the people. He was not a hero to himself. He had no need for titles or praise, but to Emberfall, he was already more than a gunslinger. He was a symbol that one human, alone and determined, could face an empire and survive. A symbol that courage and skill mattered more than numbers or machines. A symbol that the galaxy would one day learn the hard truth. Humans, even when few in number, could never be underestimated. And Emberfall had seen the first lesson. The morning sun rose blood-red over Emberfall, painting the dust and debris with a fiery light. The town was quiet, but the tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Smoke still drifted from the destroyed alien scouts, and the townsfolk moved silently, watching the hills beyond. They had seen courage in action. They had seen one human defy an empire. But today, fear returned stronger than ever, because today, Zarak himself had come. From the distant hills, the shadow of Zarak's massive skiff appeared. It was a ship designed for terror, bristling with weapons, faster and deadlier than any patrol the town had faced. Alien soldiers spilled out, marching with precision, their armor gleaming under the harsh sunlight, and at the center, riding higher than the rest, was Zarak, the tyrant whose reputation had crushed worlds and enslaved planets. His claws glinted, his eyes burned with fury, and his voice, amplified through the skiff speakers, boomed across the town. "Humans," he bellowed, "you have defied me long enough. Today Emberfall dies. Today I crush your petty resistance, and I make an example for the galaxy." The townsfolk froze. Children clutched their mothers' skirts. Farmers gripped tools that would not save them from the tyrant's wrath. Even Harlan's hand shook slightly over his revolver. Emberfall's people had survived attacks before, but nothing like this. Nothing had prepared them for Zarak. The gunslinger stood in the open square, calm as the wind, his eyes locked on the tyrant. He did not flinch. He did not tremble. His hands rested lightly on his blasters, ready but relaxed. He had studied this moment long before it arrived. Every trap, every plan, every observation of Zarak's soldiers had led to this. He was not reckless. He was precise, patient, and unyielding. Zarak laughed, a sound like grinding metal.
So the human dares to stand in the open? You think your skill matters here?
The gunslinger did not answer. He let the first bolts of energy fly past him, ducking behind a toppled crate, rolling smoothly, and firing back in a measured rhythm. Every shot struck a weak point, a joint in the alien armor, a wheel on a walker, a control panel on a hovering skiff. Each strike was deliberate, calculated, and deadly. The alien soldiers faltered. Their precision and discipline could not match the human's unpredictability. He moved like a shadow, disappeared and reappeared, striking from angles no one expected. Emberfall's people watched in awe as their defender, one human, challenged the might of a tyrant and his army. Zarak's voice boomed again. "Enough!" he roared. "If you wish to resist, human, then you will face me directly, one-on-one. If you die, your town dies. If you win..." His claws flexed in thought. "Even victory will not save you from the rest of my empire." The gunslinger's eyes narrowed. He had anticipated this. He stepped forward, removing his hat, revealing a calm, determined face beneath. "Then let's end this," he said simply. The alien soldiers hesitated, unsure what to do. Their leader had challenged a single human directly, and they were ordered not to intervene. The town watched in tense silence as their defender and the tyrant faced one another. Zarak descended from his skiff onto the dust, his massive frame towering over the human. Claws glinting, eyes burning with anger, he studied the gunslinger. "You are bold," he hissed. "But boldness does not win wars. Strength does. Speed does. Power does. And I have all three." The gunslinger crouched slightly, blasters at the ready. "Strength isn't just power," he said. "Speed isn't just movement, and courage isn't just lack of fear. You've learned that already, Zarak. Humans fight differently. We survive differently. And today you'll learn how dangerous that can be." Zarak lunged first, a blur of claws and energy. The gunslinger rolled to the side, firing precise shots that clipped the tyrant's armor. Sparks flew as the energy bolts ricocheted. Each move the gunslinger made was calculated. He did not strike wildly. He struck where it would hurt, slow, and distract. The duel moved across the town square. Barrels exploded, crates splintered, and dust rose in thick clouds. The townsfolk watched, frozen yet inspired. Even from hiding, they could feel the pulse of the fight. Human courage against tyrant power. skill against overwhelming might. Zarak roared, slamming his claws into the ground, sending a shockwave through the square. The gunslinger leapt over the wave, landing lightly, his eyes never leaving the tyrant. "You rely on fear," he said. "Fear makes you predictable. Fear makes you weak. You've built your empire on it, but you didn't anticipate one human willing to face it without flinching." The alien soldiers faltered further. They had always thought humans fragile, weak, and easy to crush. They had never seen one fight like this, never seen one move with such calm determination in the face of death. Doubt began to creep into their ranks. Zarak's attacks grew faster, more furious. He used every technique he had mastered over decades of conquest. Crushing blows, lightning strikes, even manipulation of energy weapons built into his armor. The gunslinger barely dodged, rolling, ducking, and firing in perfect rhythm. Every shot slowed Zarak. Every move made the tyrant hesitate. Then, in a moment of brilliance, the gunslinger used the town itself. He led Zarak toward the narrow alleyways, using broken carts and barrels to funnel him. He fired at weak points in the tyrant's armor while forcing him into traps, pits, and obstacles. The alien staggered, slowed, confused. Emberfall's defenders watched silently as their town itself became part of the fight, guided by one human's cunning. Zarak roared in frustration. "Impossible!" he shouted. "I am the tyrant. I crush worlds. I destroy planets." And a single human, his voice faltered, fear creeping in, dares to challenge me? The gunslinger did not hesitate. He moved with precision, landing a shot that disabled one of Zarak's energy amplifiers. Sparks flew from the tyrant's armor, forcing him to stagger back. Emberfall's people gasped, but the gunslinger did not celebrate. There was no time for victory yet. The fight was far from over. Zarak roared again, swinging claws in a desperate attack. The gunslinger dodged, rolled behind cover, and fired from a new angle. Every movement was deliberate. Every shot calculated to weaken the tyrant physically and mentally. The duel was no longer just about strength. It was about will, and the gunslinger's will did not break. Hours passed. Dust filled the air, smoke rose from burning skiffs, and Emberfall itself trembled under the force of the fight. The townsfolk, though still hidden, began to cheer quietly when they saw the tyrant stumble. Children whispered to each other, "He's winning. He's really winning." Zarak's fury reached its peak. "I am unstoppable," he roared. "You cannot survive me, human." The gunslinger crouched, steady, focused. "I am more than you think," he replied. "I am human." With that, he moved faster than Zarak expected, firing a precise combination of shots that hit weak points in armor, disabled energy weapons, and caused the tyrant to stagger. Zarak roared in disbelief as the gunslinger closed the distance, using agility, skill, and sheer determination to outmaneuver him. Finally, Zarak fell to one knee, exhausted, wounded, and bewildered. The gunslinger stood a few feet away, calm, ready for any final strike. But he did not fire. He looked down at the tyrant and said simply, "This is what happens when you underestimate humans.
You may have power. You may have weapons.
You may have conquered many worlds, but courage, cunning, and will are stronger than any empire." The alien soldiers froze. They had seen their leader fall, not to superior numbers, not to overwhelming weapons, but to the unbreakable resolve of one human. Emberfall's people emerged cautiously from hiding, watching their defender stand victorious. Zarak, furious but alive, retreated with the remainder of his forces. He had learned something that day, something terrifying. Humans could not be controlled through fear alone. One human, alone, had faced an empire and survived. One human had turned despair into courage, doubt into hope. The gunslinger walked slowly through Emberfall streets, checking on the town and ensuring the wounded were safe. He did not celebrate. He did not boast. He was a guardian, a teacher, and a symbol. The town was free for now, but the fight had proven a truth the galaxy would never forget. Humans fight differently. Humans endure. And humans, even when alone, are deadly. That night, Emberfall slept under a new sky, not one of fear, but of hope. One human had stood against a tyrant and prevailed, and though Zarak would return, Emberfall's people now knew that courage, skill, and determination could change the course of history. The gunslinger walked to the outskirts of town, looking at the stars. He knew the tyrant would not give up, but he also knew this: as long as humans were willing to fight, no tyrant, no army, and no empire could ever truly break them.